Tony, just real broad question. This is going to be the most broad question I've ever asked, just as we get ready for AEW All In coming up very, very soon, August 25th. How's AEW doing?
Fantastic. It's a really exciting time for the company.
Okay. What about your take on the current state of All Elite Wrestling? What do you think? How are they doing right now?
Yeah, well, they're horrible. Come on. It's just, I've given up.
Good match. Because he was grinding on the boss's daughter. Good match.
The first ever NFL executive in a draft room shaking off the effects of a pile driver he received on national television in a wrestling ring the night before.
She's not a heel.
There's no hope for him. Nothing's going to turn that company around. There's no light bulb going to go off in anybody's head and all of a sudden realize, oh, this is how we actually get people to watch TV. They have no idea what they're doing, and they're too stubborn to learn. There's nobody there that knows what a story actually is.
Oh, AEW. All Elite Wrestling. It's like when you're a kid, right? And you're really, really hyped for that new Thomas set. You know, big boulder on the mountain, the new top heel of the island of Sodor. It's about to roll down and wreck some shit. And you're just begging your family to get you it for Christmas. And then Christmas comes, and somebody decides that you're better off with some ugly, plaid, knee-high socks. Because Thomas's work rate just ain't good enough. Pretty much goes without saying at this point that AEW's 2024 was disastrous. Putting aside all the noise, the E-drone versus sicko thing for a moment, there's almost no metric that you can actually point to that can say that AEW succeeded in any meaningful way this year. Beyond the renewal and Max deal, the houses continued to empty, ratings, online engagement, and public sentiment continued to roll down the hill like that fucking boulder on the island of Sodor. But with that said, in the interest of fairness, I'm going to start this off with one of the very, very few positives. That being AEW's treatment of Sting. Of all the things that you could criticize and mock about AEW this year, which there are many, you'd be hard-pressed to hate on their treatment of Sting. After his humiliation ritual run in the WWE, Sting has had an amazing 4 years in AEW. They've utilized him in key spots, minimizing his age while emphasizing his strengths. His run has shown a real discipline that I have to give Tony Khan credit for. By pairing him with Darby Allin in 2020, AEW set a pretty amazing template for utilizing legends to get young guys over. Imagine like what they said they were going to do with Star Wars, handing it off to a new generation, respectfully and slowly handing off the series to newcomers. But this time, not have Sting drink blue milk from an alien's boob. I hate his life. While the build was sort of a steaming pile, the retirement match at Revolution in the Greensboro Coliseum was kick-ass. And having Sting's sons there to respectfully see him off was an inspired choice. Darby Allin wrote a really moving article in the Players Tribune which said, "I'm so glad Tony Khan paired us together and that he's giving Sting this incredible send-off. So many guys end their careers on the worst possible note. Either the business embarrasses them or they embarrass it, or both. It's depressing. Like I said, wrestling can be a shitty cycle, and if there's one last chapter of Sting's legacy that gets written, I hope it's this. Cycles can be broken. The wrestling business can actually treat older wrestlers with respect and not spit on them on their way out." Couldn't have said it any better. It's just a shame that that same level of respect is not afforded to anyone else in the industry, especially when you've paid your way into the dirt sheet industrial complex. In 2024, AEW's weaponization of the wrestling media reached comically ridiculous levels. From the well-documented smear campaigns the company engages in on wrestlers who have fallen out of favor with the Reseda crew, Dave Meltzer taking the opportunity to editorialize during a write-up about Dutch Mantel's health issues. Yeah, fuck you for that, Dave. I didn't get a chance to cover it, but that alone guarantees that the rest of the time this channel exists, I will continue to mock you, your acolytes, and your shitty publication for the rest of time. And these stupid press conferences.
Hi, Kate from Fightful. You guys seem very motivated to find gold here, and I just wanted to ask what it was like to come into a company and see so many black champions, and what it meant to challenge right off the bat, essentially, a former black world champion.
Oh, let me. See, I don't like that. I don't like that black champion. It's just a champion. See, we've normalized this already, and that's what I want to do with it. Winning a title as a black champion, and there's other black champions here. We can kind of erase that word now. We could just say champion. It could be it could be a black champion. It could be Asian champion. It can be Latin champion. It could be any champion. So we've already normalized that, so we can kind of erase that black champion, and it's just champion.
AEW has continued to pander to these hacks who belong more in the fucking stands than they do the office. That hasn't stopped Tony. Tony created a continuity tracker position for which he hired Will Washington, a Fightful acolyte and career glazer who has zero experience in the industry, to handle the program's continuity. Oh, and did I mention that he's actually the cousin of one of the most pushed talents of the year, Swerve Strickland? Instead of, all the veterans with over 40 years of experience that Tony has just decided to spend six figures on so that they can sit in catering and enjoy a nice meal while the Reseda crew passive-aggressively throws shots at them. It's not a real business. And don't take it from me, some mark with a fancy microphone and swooshy static effects. Take it from Devon Dudley, someone who's actually in the industry.
As far as I'm concerned, from my understanding, from people in the locker room, the 3 times I was there in the meetings, every single person said he's a snake. And they don't know why Tony Khan is trusting him. I don't know him personally, but in what I've seen and his demeanor and all that, I got to tend to agree that they're probably right. He can write whatever he wants to say about me, but the bottom line is everybody in that locker room thinks that you're a snake. When I've asked the questions, who is that guy? I've gotten the same response from everybody. Even when I was on the Jericho cruise and his name came up, that was what was being said. And, again, I'm not going out there saying anything bad about him, but I'm telling you what the perception is about him within the company that he works for. And these are people that say, well, I'm nice to him because if I'm not nice to him, he'll go to Tony, say something, I'm off for TV. So I don't say anything.
And I include this because the most bizarre part of AEW this year is that you cannot separate criticism between the on-air presentation and the disastrous internet slander culture. People think I'm brutal on AEW, but again, I'm just some mark with a microphone. They hold other people's livelihoods in their hands. And I think it's fucked up that high school tier whisper campaigns are enough to derail a huge chunk of wrestling's public reputation in 2024. The other thing that does that is the endless array of heatless bangers. I cannot tell you how many times there was some nothing match that got announced on a week's notice and that was called a dream match, or how many times there was some awful booking of an on-air talent that derailed their momentum, contradicted their character, and killed fan interest that was met with endless Meltzer platitudes of good match, good match, good match. They had a great match. It was a great match. They got in there and they had a good match. It became crystal clear in 2024 that someone has lost the argument when they're having a discussion in wrestling, when they fall on this crutch phrase, good match. Because at some point, we're gonna have to decide what determines, what it means, what makes a good match. Because every single match going 15 to 25 minutes on weekly TV, where the wrestlers kick out of finishes, main event guys go the distance with literal who's who do not appear on TV for the next 6 months, does not a good match make.
Good match.
Nope, stop. Go fuck yourself, Dave. Not a good match. Stop it. Non-existent storylines. Many say that AEW's storylines are chaotic, that they're disorganized, and just a chore to keep track of. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that beyond a few exceptions, storylines in AEW don't even exist. There are storylines in the sense that events happen and they lead to a match. That's about it. How can you call the two awful company takeover angles, one of which is still going on, storylines? The Young Bucks' awful, cringeworthy authority figure act in which they cosplayed as golf caddies with porn stashes fizzled out. And Jon Moxley's Death Rider angle has been so stupidly vague that there really isn't even a point to anything. It's just rambling. And I'm a tough guy, and I'm gonna ramble about how the company's gotta change. I'm a tough guy, and AEW's gotta change, man. Yeah, great angle to be running, by the way, on your TV. Our product is such ass that our top heel is gonna be right, and he's gonna go to the New York Post and talk about a hard reset that's just gonna have to take place. The fuck? What are these angles? It's not even a storyline. It's like going on fucking Reddit, Squared Circle, or going on 4chan, PW, with a notepad handy and going, see what they're saying? See? Write that down. That's gotta be our angle. Let's just make that a storyline. They're not even storylines. They're excuses for matches to happen. And so many of these excuses for these matches to take place is usually some kind of variety of who is the best wrestler in the world. And when they do commit to some kind of arc, they pick people who the audience is least interested in. I'm sorry, I don't care about the Meta Pockets guy from PWG becoming a serious warrior, finding himself to restore the feeling of AEW. Here's a hard red pill about the feeling. It was good storylines, hot crowds, and a manageable roster and brand identity. That was it. That was the feeling. Success. It was success. What even is AEW anymore? Who is this even for? Oh yeah, that's right. Tony Khan. Oh boy, what else is there to even say about this moron? I've said it all on this channel. So how about we go through a little abridged timeline of Tony's antics in 2024. January. Tony lets it slip that he's not allowed to seek a new TV deal for AEW as they're still in the exclusivity contract period, and he's got to sit and wait with his dick in his hand while WBD attempts to acquire Monday Night Raw. Tries to dunk on Jinder Mahal on Twitter, only for the entire internet wrestling community to defend him, and he gets promptly blown the fuck out when it is pointed out that Jinder Mahal's main event with Seth Rollins on Monday Night Raw outdrew all of his weekly shows combined. February. Tony tweets out a gloating message about Rossi Ogawa's firing, only to find that the Stardom locker room loves him, and he alienates nearly every single Stardom wrestler from AEW. Loses the Wrestling Observer Award, the publication that he literally takes booking advice from for the Promoter of the Year spot to Triple H. March. Mercedes Moné says in an interview that she's going to go back to the WWE eventually, near the end of her career, a week before she debuted in AEW. April. CM Punk has his infamous Ariel Helwani interview where he reveals that nobody respects Tony Khan as a boss and that his NDAs are worthless.
I mean, it's the truth is the truth. Like he's not a boss. He's a nice guy. and I think ultimately that is a detriment to the company, but it's not my company. I'm an outsider. I thought I was brought in to, sell merchandise and tickets and draw, numbers for pay-per-views and stuff. And I clearly did that. But that's not what the place was about.
Tony then releases 10 wrestlers on April Fool's Day. And they don't think it's serious initially, but he went back on his long-held, I honor my contracts ethos. Then, Edge, Adam Copeland, cuts a rah-rah speech on live TV because CM Punk hurt Tony's feelings. Tony then decided to air the backstage fight footage at All In from 2023 live on Dynamite as a gotcha in response to the interview, only for the footage to reveal that Tony Khan is a goof that is physically threatened by lunchroom tier scraps. Then, Tony decided to take a bump on live TV, which dropped 70,000 viewers from the week prior. And after that, Tony was invited to NFL press coverage, where he wore a stupid Andy Kaufman-esque neck brace and says WWE is the Harvey Weinstein of wrestling, which immediately was awkward as hell, got him cut off, and also he referred to his brand as Pepsi. Then we move to May. AEW is canceled on multiple different international networks within a 3-day period. June. Tony then goes on that infamous Twitter rant where he refers to himself as a sicko and that he makes wrestling for other sickos. Oh, and then hilariously, a few months after calling his brand the Pepsi of pro wrestling, Pepsi then became the third most popular brand in soda. Dr. Pepper went over. He then books a residency for Collision and Ring of Honor at a 1,300 capacity venue for 4 weeks. Then, after that, he flew in Ultimo Guerrero for a match with Kazuchika Okada and made him wear a mask, despite not wrestling in one for over 10 years, which resulted in AEW's prop guy having to rig together a half-assed one that falls off constantly. AEW's production then had to edit the match in post to make it look passable as the crowd was laughing at Ultimo Guerrero. July. Tony decided to book Stephanie Vaquer in a main event spot on TV and at Forbidden Doors pay-per-view against Mercedes Moné, only for her to sign a deal with the WWE a week later. Tony then had that infamous meeting and picture with Shane McMahon, only for Shane to likely realize that, yeah, this guy's a goof. I really probably shouldn't be working for him. Then the MJF women's locker room incident with Britt Baker happens, and Britt Baker is fined and suspended. August. The Young Bucks disappear from TV a night before All In because it turns out that Tony gave them limited dates and didn't plan ahead. September. The turnstile count confirms that All In 2024 was 36% less than last year. Tony then deletes wins and losses from the AEW roster page, completely giving up and finally conceding the sports-based presentation narrative. Tony changes up the plans for WrestleDream, doesn't coordinate with producers, meaning that Darby Allin ends up looking like a fucking idiot for giving up his title match with Bryan Danielson. October. Tony secures a new lucrative television deal for AEW, including a simulcast on Max, which is then immediately overshadowed by rock-bottom Dynamite ratings and attendance. Miro once again asks for his release, and it's not granted, despite not being used for what feels like a century at this point. November. Bobby Lashley gives an interview where he says he was disappointed to leave WWE as he wanted to retire there, but the lack of creative in the new administration necessitated his departure. So once again, AEW is proving that they are the second option at best. AEW is then forced to move their Australian show to a smaller venue due to abysmal ticket sales. December. GCW talent Effie goes off on a podcast, leading Tony to pull AEW from upcoming GCW shows out of spite. Rampage and Collision hit record lows in 1 week combined, failing to draw 1 million viewers. The Continental Classic causes 3 straight shows of viewership drop-off because bangers aren't enough to draw an audience. AEW then loses in the ratings to an NXT that features one of their harshest critics and an old head and nobody named Eric Bischoff. Ray Phoenix trends worldwide after disclosing inhumane treatment he feels he went through in AEW. The All In Texas kickoff event is then only attended by 100 or so fans. Tony Khan is then forced to confirm that Rampage is canceled. Dave Meltzer finally admits that Shockwave talks with Fox fizzled out after AEW's declining ratings. And now, for the worst of the worst, the undisputed worst part of AEW in 2024 is the sickos. Truthfully, AEW would not have the hate that it does if its rabid, self-branded sickos weren't some of the most disingenuous, smug people you will ever encounter. We all remember the dark days of WWE in 2019 to 2021. You'll remember many people who criticized the WWE were fans of WWE. They hated the product at the time. They were loud about it because they knew it could be better. Joining that chorus were the proto-sickos, the type of people who dunked so hard on WWE for the right reasons, mind you. But I'm talking about the people like Tranquilo Club, Drainmaker, the Wrestling Observer, who decreed AEW God's gift to pro wrestling, who talked all kinds of confident shit for years.
Be that these pro wrestlers can become stars, right? No, I mean, that's just such a novel concept. I don't see how that's possible. You got to hire failed NFL players.
But then, a wild thing happened. WWE got its shit together, and slowly but surely, the fed bad crowd didn't have much of a leg to stand on anymore. And around 2022, when AEW began to fold to its internal backstage culture getting out of hand, the shine started to wear off. We all stuck with it, hoping and praying that it would get better. But in 2024 in particular, it was just too obvious that shit was never going to change in AEW. Not as long as Tony is there, at least. And what happened? Some of the voices who were very critical of WWE for the right reasons and necessary reasons began to apply the same standard of criticism to AEW. And the sickos didn't like that very much. Guys like JD from New York, Solomonster, Wrestling Soup, Pro Wrestling Bits, Conan, people who aren't Jim Cornette, all got branded bad faith. And when the kitchen started to get just a little bit smoky and the heat was turned up just a little bit, where do you think guys like Tranquilo Club went? Offline! After it became so undeniable that AEW's problems needed to be discussed, all of a sudden, the narrative shifted. Enjoy pro wrestling. On-air rah-rah speeches. It's not that serious. Dismissive, passive-aggressive crap that seeks to hide and use victimhood and tales of toxic fandom while hiding behind a media that spins defamatory narratives about the talent on its roster. People who work for them. So I say again, do not tell me that AEW is good for wrestling, because it's not. I understand the need for multiple successful companies existing. I truly don't want the WWE to be the sole option, neither for audiences nor wrestlers. It's been proven time and time again that the existence of multiple promotions helps wrestlers get better, and it provides more options for audiences. But 2024 was the year that finally people began to admit en masse that it's nothing more than a billionaire's toy box. And that's not good for pro wrestling. Ugh, had to get that off my chest. But what about you, Kino crew? What was your favorite AEW mishap this year? Whoever you rally, whichever toys you pay for, whichever stadiums you, fortunately, don't fill. Just be sure to keep it Kino, because life is cinema.